Howdy folks, my name is Sergeant Samples, and in today's video we're going to make a custom faction to import into OHD. Not only is this a video I've wanted to make for a while, but it was also specifically requested after I posted my last video, so I'm finally getting around to making this video. One of the first questions to ask about making a faction for Operation Harsh Doorstop is why make a faction? Factions are one of the three core pillars of modding OHD. Those three pillars are factions, maps, and game modes. Maps are pretty self-explanatory. Game modes are how you could make very complex changes to how OHD plays, but factions are how you would modify everything from minor details such as projectile damage or whether a weapon fires tracers, all the way to adding custom character models and weapons to the game. So today we're going to add some custom character models as well as add in a couple of weapons that I found for free. Links for these items will be found in the description in case you're interested in using them, and of course remember to properly attribute credit if that's required by the license for those items. Take a look at this flowchart. The first item all the way on the left is the faction blueprint. That is where you set references to vehicles, vocal profiles or the voice lines that AI characters use, the kit items that are in this particular faction, and the UI items such as the faction's name and flag that is used in the deploy menu. Inside the kit is where you set the inventory that the character uses in this particular kit. You can create custom pickups for custom weapons, and then there's also a data table asset that references the specific first and third person models that are used for that particular kit. So depending on exactly what it is that you want to change or modify in Operation Harsh Doorstop will indicate how many of these assets you need to copy into your mod folder. Step number one, we're going to come up here to the top and hit this button, Create Mod. It's going to bring up this page here. We can give our mod a name, a mod author, add a description if you'd like, and then hit Create Mod. Once you've created the mod, it's going to show this screen. This is a data asset that points to where it's going to find the particular things that you've modified. Game modes always go in a folder labeled Core. Factions always go in a folder labeled Factions, Maps in Maps, etc. Since this mod is only going to include factions, if we'd like, we can actually delete these other things here and leave just the faction folder. You're not required to, but since that's what we're going to be working with, we can go ahead and change it up like this. Now, the very first video that I ever made on this channel related to folder structure. That's how important folder structure is that it's the first thing that I talked about. I'll link to that video here in case you want to go watch it. But the most important thing is that this data asset never moves from the top content folder, and then you create the folders within this folder that point to the correct assets. For a faction mod, only one folder is a hard requirement, the factions folder that will contain your faction blueprints. The other 5 folders are technically optional. The mod will function perfectly without following this folder structure, but I do because it helps me stay organized and follow the same pattern that the devs have used everywhere else in the SDK. Those folders are art for textures and materials, characters for character skeletal meshes, items for weapon blueprints and any other items that would be in a character's inventory, kits for kit data assets, and UI for flag icons, weapon icons, and anything else that would be used for a user interface. So the character models we're going to use for this faction are these 4 guys right here that I found for free on Fab. And I want to say here that I'm not going to discuss how to rig custom character models or weapon models to use the game's animations. That is a separate topic that is a lot more involved and would require their own videos. If you're looking for that information, I'm going to point you towards this weapon tutorial that was made a couple of years ago. Go check that out if you want a step-by-step process for how to add a custom weapon to Operation Harsh Doorstop. But for now, the most important thing to know is that anything that you modify or are adding to OHD needs to be included in your mod folder. I'm going to move these character meshes into my mod folder along with all of their textures and materials. I also want to take a quick second to point out how you can change the physics asset that a custom character uses by opening up the skeletal mesh, scrolling down to physics, and finding this HD character physics asset. Not only is that one less thing you have to ship with your mod, but it also avoids some of the weirdness that you might see with custom character models where when they die they just sort of flop around like a wet spaghetti noodle. This physics asset will kind of avoid some of that weirdness that you might see. The next thing we'll need to do is copy over a data table that correlates the first person mesh with the third person mesh that we're going to need when we start working with kits. You can find one of those data tables under HD Assets, Kits, Common. I'm going to copy that into my Factions folder just so I know where it is. And as long as we're copying things, we're also going to copy a faction blueprint that's under HD Assets, Factions. Let's copy one of those in here, and we'll need to give it a different name. And we're going to grab one of these kit assets that are under HD Assets Kits. I'm going to copy this into my kits folder. And these pickup assets that you see here are what is dropped when a character dies so that you can take their inventory. And let's go back to our data table. I'm going to change this out. And when we open this up, all of these rows that you see here correlates a third person mesh with a first person mesh. And we have several in here that we don't really need. I'm going to remove a whole bunch so that all we're left with is 4. Now this data table is utilized in the kits. So we're going to open up one of our kit that we copied over just a minute ago. This is where we set the inventory of this kit. 1 is usually the primary weapon, and you can select an item class here. This is the weapon blueprint, slot number 1. These do not have to be listed in order. This has the sidearm on slot number 2. It's number 3 in the array here, but it's still going to appear as the second in game. So these do not have to be listed in order, but the slot number that you give it here does matter. Ordinarily, 1 is for primary weapons, 2 is for sidearms, 3 is for frag grenades, 4 is for smoke grenades, 5 is for bandages, and then 6 and onward you can make whatever you like, but set up your kit however you want. It's totally fine. We can denote which is the primary item slot number. This is what your character is always going to start with. We're going to select our kit drop right here. That's what this item right here is, this blueprint. After we change this up to make it what we want, we're going to set that here in the kit drop prefab class. We can also set kit requirements, whether you need to have a minimum number of squad members, limit how many of these can be in match at a given time, whatever you want, you can set those here. Character variations is set right here. We're going to find our data table that we just made, and then select a row name. This is what assigns the first and third person for this particular kit. We can also denote whether or not it's a squad leader kit, which is important when dealing with like the construction system or being able to place rally points. The kit display name is here, and the kit display symbol is here. There are several stock symbols you can choose from if it's a sniper, rifleman, etc. Kits are also used to import custom weapons into Operation Harsh Doorstop. This is a gun that I found on Fab for free, the SS2 V5. Like I said, I'm not going to go into depth about how to rig guns or anything like that, but to actually use this item in game and assign it to a kit, we're going to need to put it into a weapon blueprint. Because this is rigged to use the M16A2 animations, I'm going to find the M16A2. All weapons can be found under HD Assets, Items, Weapons, and then this one in particular is under Rifles M16A2. And you can see here, this one has SL on the end. That denotes that it is a squad leader variant, which means it uses projectiles that have tracers. This one that does not have SL means that it does not use tracers. I would prefer this one. So I'm going to select this weapon and create child blueprint class. I want to create a child because the details for the M16A2 are already built into this weapon blueprint. Things like what projectile it uses, the animation blueprint that's assigned to it. So all I really have to do is assign the skeletal mesh to it. So by creating a child, I'm going to move this into my items folder right here next to the skeletal mesh. Open this up. So I'm going to click on the weapon and drop in the SS2V5 into both the first person and the third person, just like that. And always double check the animation blueprint. Sometimes when you drop in a different skeletal mesh, it might zero out or clear this animation class from this drop down here. So just make sure that it's still using the correct animation blueprint. In this instance, it didn't change. This is already ready to go. Something else I'm going to want to do while I've got this open is add an optic. This obviously doesn't have iron sights. So I'm going to add component, static mesh. Let's find the EOTech right here. Position it where we want. Let's change this to EOTech first person, 1P for first person. And then I'm going to duplicate this in exactly the same spot and change this to EOTech 3P for third person. And then you can look at this blueprint to see what it's connected to. So like this one here is underneath the first person, and this one here is also under first person. So let's move it, just drag and drop to the weapon mesh. This one is under first person, this one is under third person. Let's double check the collision on these. No collision. I get annoyed by the shadows that they cast sometimes because they're different from first and third person. So I'm going to make these so that they don't cast shadows. We're going to set the third person to owner no see, and click on the first person and set only owner see. What that does is if this weapon is being carried by an AI, for example, or another player, you will not see the first person optic. And when you are carrying this weapon, you will not see the third person optic sort of floating off to the side. And finally, to adjust the sight picture, you're going to click on default sight over in the component list, and the camera will align with whatever the vertical, the Z axis of this is. If this was still the M16A2, it would be lined up with the center of the rear peep sight on the M16A2's carry handle. Because we're using this optic here, I'm going to drag this into the middle of this. So with our weapon blueprint finished, we're going to open the kit that I want to have this weapon in and put this right here in the primary weapon slot. And then I'm going to adjust the rest of this accordingly. With all of my weapon blueprints finished, now it's time to connect them up to the faction itself. So I've opened up the faction blueprint, and the items that are at the top are the user interface items. This is the flag icon that will be displayed in the map deploy screen. And you need to set them in a number of places along here based on whether you're hovered over it or whether it's selected, things like that. And then finally, in the actual deploy menu in the mini-map that's in the middle, when you're selecting a spawn location, this is the icon that will be shown there. Beneath that, we have the victory text. This is a custom message that will be displayed at the end of a game. I've also set all of my kits here under faction info. If you need to add more, there's this little plus icon right here. Or you can hit this garbage can to completely clear out all of the items. Or you can click on any individual one and hit delete. Just beneath all of the kits are our vehicle classes, the faction name, visible in faction select UI. That means that this will be selectable from the drop down in the main menu when you play instant action. This display name short is the name that will appear in the drop down menu. So if you have something specific you want to show in the menu, this is what will be shown there. And then SRV, this is the acronym that is shown next to the flag when it's being captured up in the upper right hand corner during a game. We set our default skeletal meshes. Best I can tell, these aren't really used anywhere. And last but not least, the vocal profiles for the AI. With everything set up, my faction is created, all of my kits are created, and the last thing to do is to just test the hell out of this mod. All the kits seem to be here. Let's spawn in. Looks like everything is working. As part of your testing process, I highly recommend that you package the mod. I have a whole other separate video that is on packaging and uploading, and I'll link to that here. That is how to build a faction for Operation Harsh Doorstop. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, reach out to me on Steam, or in the OHD Discord. Thank you for watching, good luck with whatever you're working on, and have a great day.